There's one specific place on the New Orleans Saints that feels like watching a legend in their prime. We got all that and a little bit of lanyard for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I'm your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, buckle up. We're about to see a battle at strong safety once training camp rolls around. We're also going to be taking a look at Cedric Wilson's new deal and how it was a smart deal, not only from the signing, but also the contract structure itself. And to kick everything off, we're going to answer the question about whether or not the New Orleans Saints overpaid for Chase Young. And look, sometimes it's not about what you do, it's how you do it. And that's why Khai Harley looks like a legend in his prime. We got all that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much for being an everydayer and making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers are going to get $200 in bonus bets whenever you win your first $5 bet. Head over to FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Well, look, oftentimes we talk about watching legends. We're talking about watching them on the court, on the field, on the microphone. You know what I mean? We're talking about like the GOATs. We're talking about G-Rap. We're talking about, MJ. We're talking about Bron. We're talking about Tom Brady. We're talking about all these guys. I think it's time to draw attention to the legend of Khai Harley. Now, of course, look, I'm having fun and everything like that. I'm not really trying to put too much pressure on Khai Harley's head like that. But Khai Harley is the guy that you can credit with a lot of things that the New Orleans Saints do when it comes to the salary cap. His informal title is that of salary cap guru. He's the one that helps with all the restructures and balancing of the books and all these other things. And obviously, it's not just him. It's Mickey Loomis, the general manager. It's a team of people that are all around them. But Khai is kind of the guy that brings in the gap principles and all these things that kind of takes what the New Orleans Saints are doing at the NFL level with the salary cap and treats it more like financial management, basically borrowing, using, utilizing, repaying, all these other things. So the Saints never look at the salary cap as a fixed 1 year total. They're looking at, okay, how do we borrow from next year? And then, restructure contracts to kind of mitigate what we did last year and all these other things. So they do all these really creative things. And because of what it is that they did with Chase Young's contract, it makes it so that the Saints don't overpay on his deal. It's a 1 year, $13 million contract. We broke down the contract in last episode about how it's, a $470,000 bonus per game that he plays, all those other things. The thing that I really want to highlight here is how the Saints handled that per game bonus, okay? That per game active bonus. So it requires him to be active, first of all, per Josina Anderson over at CBS. That's big, right? You have to be active, not just on the active roster. So that's pretty big. But the thing to know about these performance incentives, these availability incentives and bonuses and all those things is that there's a difference between those that are likely to be earned, i.e. they did it the year before, so you're expecting them to be able to do it again this year, and what's not likely to be earned, i.e. they weren't in the range that makes you believe that last year that will make you believe that they'll do it this year. So for instance, Michael Thomas's incentives last year were all mostly considered not likely to be earned because he didn't reach the same numbers the year before. And, he was done after the third week of the season last year or in 2022. So that makes sense. However, when it comes to Chase Young, 16 games is what he played last year. So here going into 2024, his 17 game addition of roster bonuses, 16 of them are likely to be earned because that's what he did last year. Now, the difference between likely to be earned and not likely to be earned is that if a bonus is likely to be earned, you're charged that up front as the team. It applies to your 2024, your present year salary cap. And then whatever doesn't end up happening, let's say that he misses, let's say 3 games, then 3 games worth, or really 2 games worth, because one of them is not likely to be earned, right? It's only 16 are. So 2 games worth of that $470,000 per game bonus end up being credited back to you in your salary cap the next year. So whatever he doesn't achieve that you've already paid for, you get credit for next year, is the way that it works. That's the simple way to put it. If it's not likely to be earned, then things are kind of tabulated the next year or at the end of the season, and then it's charged to your next year's salary cap. So for like the Michael Thomas situation, nothing will be charged next year's salary or to this year's salary cap because he didn't reach any of his incentives from last year. So it can be a little bit troublesome because what that means is that you're paying $7.99 million in this case, or $7.99 million minus $470,000 to Chase Young up front. So it could carry a pretty big cap hit for you, right? You're effectively paying out the majority of that $13 million deal if he makes the workout bonus as well, minus $470,000, right? Minus 1 game, which is the one that's not likely to be earned. So what do the Saints do? What does Harley do? They say, okay, sure. We're going to pay all that out as a likely to be earned roster bonus. We're going to front that money here in 2024, but we're going to treat it as a signing bonus. And we're going to put 4 years of void years at the end of the deal. And then that way, instead of taking on almost what we'll call it, what would it be, $752 or $7.52 million, instead of paying all that up front, we're going to prorate it. And then instead, the charges, and then they also prorated that workout bonus, by the way. So the charges end up being, on a per year basis, $2.281 million, just under $2.3 million, plus the $2.7 million base salary from this year. So he ends up still, taking up some time or some salary cap. He still has a salary cap hit, but it's way less dramatic than the entirety of all of those bonuses being paid right up front all in 1 year, and then hoping that you might get some credit back the following season. And oh, by the way, even though they're treating it as a signing bonus, they would still get credit next year for anything that he doesn't earn when that dead cap sets in. Now, what this does do is that it creates a dead cap hit of just under $9 million. And he ends up taking on a cap hit this year of just under $3.5 million or something like that, just under $3 or $4.5 million. So it's just a really good way to address this contract. It's a really, really smart way to do it because you don't take on the full brunt of all of those, bonuses and everything right off the bat. You take on the brunt, but then you spread it out over the course of 5 years for your accounting purposes. And then it just makes it a lot easier for you. So the Saints are still sitting with something like $13 million in salary cap because of that. It's great. It's a really, really good way to go. Harley, man. Makes the job so fun. Makes the job so fun because y'all know how much I love talking contracts and explaining contracts and breaking all this stuff down. When you're doing things like this that are so innovative, so new, so refreshing, it's super cool. And I don't think necessarily that the treating per game roster bonuses as a signing bonus, I don't know that that's necessarily unique, but not a lot of teams do it. And so it's great to see something like this and be able to say, oh, look, a new mechanism, just when we thought they were running out of ideas. All right, so coming up next, we're going to, so to me, look, that's the way that you avoid overpaying, right? You avoid overpaying not by what you paid, which still isn't overpaying. We talked about the Marcus Davenport comparison there, had half a sack and got the same amount of money, like let's chill here, but, it had the upside of the same amount of money. But it's not about what you paid, it's about how you structure it, how you pay it out, and this was a really smart way to do it. Okay, coming up next, let's take a look at Cedric Wilson Jr.'s contract, the new wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. I think it's a smart signing. I think it's a smart signing because of the way that the contract is built, and I also think it's a smart signing because of the way that he might be able to contribute, and it allows the New Orleans Saints to continue to pursue at the position as well. We're going to break all of that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more with America's #1 sportsbook, and right now you can avoid all of the busted brackets. You ain't got to worry about any of that because FanDuel is going to let you bet on every single game of the NCAA tournament, women's and men's. You can get in on all of that action here all throughout March. So whether you're betting on the big upset or you're choosing the favorite, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers are going to get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 that you can then apply to things like point spreads, money lines, or you can even pick who's going to win it all. Right now, the LSU Tigers over on the women's side of March Madness are set to be the second overall favorite, just behind South Carolina. So maybe you want to go ahead and roll with a slight underdog. Iowa right now is favored to come out of their division. There's a ton for you to check out. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon today and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints get another smart contract when it comes to wide receiver Cedric Wilson Jr., especially considering the role that he's expected to play here in New Orleans. We're going to break it all down. We appreciate you very much. Make it Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 YouTube stream over at what we call Locked On Sports Today. You get it, LOST. And right now, if you're somebody that's a big fan of March Madness, college basketball, all that, it's a great way to keep up to date from the local perspective right before every game. Right before each game, we're rolling the local host previewing that very game. Locked On Sports Today over on YouTube. It's the best place to go to get all of the news around the world of sports, and especially with the NCAA tournament underway. All right, so let's take a look at Cedric Wilson Jr.'s deal with the New Orleans Saints, the 6'2", 200+ pound wide receiver coming in from Miami most immediately, but really played some of his best football back in 2021 with the Dallas Cowboys, and is coming in to kind of help to serve this role as a wide receiver that has operated in one of these wide zone systems before. He was kind of in Kellen Moore's version of that system over in Dallas as well. And then, of course, was in Mike McDaniel's version of the system over in Miami, who was the guy that held Clint, was part of the, whole like Clint, well, not really Clint Kubiak, but, Kyle Shanahan and all that stuff. Like, it's all part of the same tree. So now he comes over from Miami to New Orleans because he helps to understand the system. So I think that it's a smart signing from a couple of different angles. Let's start first with the player, right? So Cedric Wilson is somebody that comes in as a veteran coming into a young room of wide receivers. You've got two wideouts that are going into their third years. You've got one wideout going into his second year. And so when you have such a young room in that case, there's absolutely something there. Oh, and then you've got Stanley Morgan, who they also added, who's still a young player. He's got a few more years of experience, having played through his rookie contract going into his fifth year now, but doesn't have a ton of experience playing. He's got 5 receptions. He's been mostly a special teams guy, wants to reinvent himself and reintroduce himself to the NFL world as a pass catcher and as a wide receiver. So you bring in a guy like Cedric Wilson, who's got a little bit more experience, and he can be that veteran to help these guys develop, but also be that veteran who has an experience in a wide zone offense to help kind of translate that offense to these younger receivers. So I think that part is smart. Now, you're not going to pay a guy to do that. That's what you pay your coaches to do. So they've got to go out there and do things on the field as well. And I think that Cedric Wilson's one of these dudes that can make the roster. I think the expectation is that he will make the roster, considering that effectively the entirety of his first year of his contract, so the base salary and his as well as his signing bonus, are fully guaranteed. So you should expect him, or are guaranteed. Yeah, total. So you should expect him to be here in 2024 and be out on the field in 2024. I don't think that he's playing a number 1 role for you. I don't think that he's playing a number 2 role for you. I think he's playing a 3-4 type of a role for you. And so the way that I kind of look at his role is maybe like an elevated. Now, listen to me when I say elevated. Please pay more attention to the elevated than the name that I'm about to say. Goodness gracious. He's going to be more like an elevated Tre'Quan Smith. Elevated Tre'Quan Smith. So the thing that I'm looking at here is that he'll be a guy that comes out to help you block, can be a perimeter blocker on the side, but can operate out of the slot, can make tough catches over the middle of the field, and can elevate his game as a receiver, not just a blocker, but as a receiver as well. But I don't think you're expecting him to come in and rack up 100 catches and 1,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. Like, that's just not what you should be expecting from Cedric Wilson. You're looking for, big seasons from guys like Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and A.T. Perry, and then you're looking for supplemental stuff from guys like Cedric Wilson Jr. and Stanley Morgan. For now, we'll see how everything gets impacted over the course of training camp, how these guys stand out, how they compete with one another, who maybe leaps another player. who gets added to this room, because ain't no way the Saints are going to stick with 5 wide receivers right now. Like, that's just not going to be the case. So I put that out there as to say, like, that's kind of the role that we should expect. And the payment kind of reflects that. This is a 2-year deal that comes in with a $1.5 million signing bonus. And there's, of course, a void year. So you're looking at $500,000 per year in terms of what the cap charge is there. And then his base salary in 2024 is just $1.35 million. So he's just a little bit above minimum. That is guaranteed. And the only money that's guaranteed is that and that $1.5 million signing bonus. So in 2025, if they decide that they want to move on or anything like that, you're accelerating $1 million basically and everything. So it's not a big deal. It's not a big contract. And so what that tells you, first of all, is that A, this is a safe signing, but also tells you that B, like, there's an expectation of what this player is going to contribute to this team. And those expectations don't need to be high. That's why I consider this contract smart. I like that all of the guaranteed money goes in 2024 and is out of the way. And then if you decide to move on after 2024, after just 1 year, you're not taking on that much of a dead cap hit. You're effectively taking on $1 million. Not effectively, you're taking on $1 million. If they decide that they want to roll ahead with him in 2025 and things go super well, which is absolutely a possibility, he's got a $2.7 million base salary with a $200,000 roster bonus. I'm not sure yet when that roster bonus sets in. It could be that roster bonus sets in at the beginning of next year, could be at some point this year, for next year, whatever it might be. So we'll have to see exactly what the detail is around that. But it does make this contract a slight restructure candidate as well, because he gets to nearly $3 million in 2025 that you might be able to finagle and do some nice things with. So I think that if you keep him in 2025, you expect either, based on his base salary, you either expect his role to grow, or you expect to be able to restructure that contract, extend maybe. Like, there's a bunch of different ways that they could go about it. So the other reason why I call this a smart signing, beyond sort of the mentorship and everything like that he can give to the young guys, beyond the contract itself, is that role. Him being able to come in and be that blocker. Remember, you need perimeter blocking more than ever in the New Orleans Saints offense. You're going to need perimeter blocking this year because you're running a wide zone offense. You're going to expect a lot of outside zone runs, outside of the tackle runs, things like that. There will still be gap schemes. There'll still be stuff right up the middle and all that, like Taysom's power runs, using Jamal Williams in between the tackles, all those things. That will all very much still be a part of this offense. There's no taking that stuff away. You have to be able to do both. But in order for you to be able to do both, you still have to be able to do the wide zone stuff. In order for you to be able to do the wide zone stuff, you have to have good blocking on the outside. And that's a place where Cedric Wilson comes in. Now, the thing that will be interesting this year versus not last year is, how do you keep Cedric Wilson involved, not just as a blocker? Keith Kirkwood was a dead giveaway last year. For a while, Lynn Bowden was a dead giveaway last year, until like people started calling attention to it and being like, wow, they sure do run a lot when those guys are on the field. You know, we were looking at it, we broke it down here on the show. It was something like 90% after a certain point of, like, when Keith Kirkwood was on the field, they were running the ball. When Lynn Bowden was on the field, they were running the ball. And you could even find the tendency to run in which direction based upon where they were. It was not good. So how do you get creative, which is where I think you're going to see this offense needs to take steps forward from 2023. Whether they do it, we'll find out. But that's one of the things they need to be able to do, is being able to disguise themselves a little bit better over on the offensive side in terms of their offensive operation. And so Cedric Wilson, every time he's on the field, it can't just be a run, right? And it can't be a run to his side or away from him or whatever. You got to figure all that stuff out. So he's going to have to contribute. And I think that that's where having him in the slot makes a lot of sense, but also being able to operate him out wide can make a lot of sense as well. But I do think that it's a smart signing. Let's see if they utilize the player smartly when we get the team on the field in 2024. All right, coming up next, there's going to be a battle at strong safety over on the defensive side, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch during training camp. We got that coming up for you as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. If you had an extra hour in your day, how would you use it? Sleeping, resting, working a little bit more? That's probably what I would do. Some people would like to maybe read a book or something like that too. I mean, you want to spend your time using that extra hour doing something constructive. One of the reasons why I'm presently in therapy is because I would want to use that hour working. That's probably not the right decision, or at least not the healthiest decision. So, when you have that extra time, you want to find out what are the things that are special to you and how do you make more time for them. And therapy can absolutely help you do that. It's not just about being diagnosed or anything like that. It's also about reinforcing good things in your life. So if you're thinking about trying therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Learn what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon so that you can get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Barring any big acquisition as free agency rolls along ahead of the NFL draft, there will be a battle at strong safety in training camp. And one of the guys that's going to be the front runner is somebody that the New Orleans Saints just brought back on Wednesday, veteran safety Johnathan Abram. We appreciate you very much for being here. Don't forget, we are your team every day. So we'll be back tomorrow to discuss a little bit more about how Chase Young changes the defense, how he impacts the defense, and in fact, how he helps out the secondary, I think is one of the biggest pieces to this signing, assuming, of course, that he's healthy. So we'll break all of that down in tomorrow's episode. Look, the New Orleans Saints have brought back safety Johnathan Abram. We've been saying for a long time on the show here that this was going to happen, or that this was something that the Saints wanted. We also said that they wanted to bring back Isaac Yiadom, and they weren't able to get that done. But this one, they were able to get done. So 2 days in a row, 2 safeties, 2 versatile defensive backs returned to the New Orleans Saints, Ugo Amadi, as well as, of course, Johnathan Abram. But I think that the Johnathan Abram signing in particular, if you want to know more about the Ugo Amadi signing, as well as the Ali Udoh signing, you can find both of those in yesterday's episode. But the re-signing of Johnathan Abram is what I want to focus on here because, I think it's a good move. I think that he's the right guy to bring back to this locker room. Guy grew up a Saints fan, lives in Mississippi. Like, this is very close to home for him, very close to his family. Talked about how excited his family was he was going to be here. It's a signing that makes sense. And I'm sure he went out and kind of explored the market a little bit. He actually said that he looked at other teams and everything, but his priority was returning here to New Orleans. So it works for all parties. The New Orleans Saints have a need also at safety after they moved on from Marcus May and then couldn't retain Lonnie Johnson Jr. Here's an opportunity for you to bring back a guy that can compete to be a starter. So I think that the signing makes a ton of sense from that angle. It's probably going to be another 1-year deal. So that actually it is. It's another 1-year deal. So that makes sense from that angle as well, if I'm remembering the Saints announcement correctly. But I think that the big thing here as well is the battle, right? You're going to see a battle for the guy that starts next to Tyrann Mathieu. And that battle is going to be between guys like Johnathan Abram and JT Gray and Ugo Amadi, and of course, young safety Jordan Howden. Now, the Jordan Howden angle is a little bit more complicated, okay, because they like what he does as what's called a post safety, or what we would call a free safety, right? Being a rangy guy that drops back far from the line of scrimmage, middle of field type of dude that can take stuff away over the top all by himself. That's what they really like about Jordan Howden, is that range. They see him as a, deep safety type. So seeing him compete at strong safety might be a little bit counterintuitive. Now, you have to be able to do both. There's no doubt about that. You got to be able to do both, especially if you want to be able to disguise, kind of like what we were just talking about with Cedric Wilson. It was also one of the things that we talked about when the Saints signed both Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May, who they've since moved on from, unsurprisingly, a couple years ago, was their ability to disguise. They had guys that could shift, that could shimmy, that could do both, right? That could change roles and all these other things. So you didn't know, based on who was lined up where, what exactly was going to happen, right? There was no expectation in terms of what that was. So Johnathan Abram is not really that much of a deep safety. He's not like a free safety guy. He is a tackler. He's a hitter. He's a split safety guy, which is really kind of where the NFL is going right now anyway, because the NFL is daring teams to run the football because they're trying to take away the deep ball. So those 2 safeties over the top help you do that. He holds up fine, just fine in that type of coverage. He's just not somebody that you necessarily have deep all the time. So you have to be able to vary up a little bit about how he's utilized. But I mean, his ability to be able to chase down, his ability to tackle, his ability to make plays. I mean, that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game that he had, where he had the interception and the forced fumble, had some other good plays as well, had 9 tackles the next game, which was his season high, of course, up against the Atlanta Falcons to close out the season. You could just see it. And the communication between him and Tyrann Mathieu was so fun to watch and so good. They communicated incredibly well. They understood their roles, they played them out. And look, this is one of those things that I think sometimes where versatility, as exciting as it can be in the NFL, and disguise, as exciting as it can be in the NFL, you have to be able to do those things. But specified roles work. I mean, how many times have you and like a coworker at work had overlapping responsibilities and things got a little bit murky? Like that happens all the time. Whereas if you have a specified role and a specialization, then all of a sudden things become a little bit clearer. And so if you look at the way that Johnathan Abram and Tyrann Mathieu approached and were utilized in those final 2 games of the season, it just made sense. And it yielded great results as well. I mean, look at what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did against the Saints defense the first time they played in New Orleans, and then what they did at home in Tampa against the New Orleans Saints defense. And look, the defense was on an upsurge, everything towards the end of the season. I get that. But one of the big things was, no Marcus May. Jordan Howden was sick. He wasn't able to start that week. And then so Johnathan Abram was in, and people pointed at that like, oh, that's going to be a weakness in their secondary. And look how well he performed. So sometimes it's like, look, what maybe you saw a guy struggle with in one system isn't the same thing that he struggles with in a new system, and the system mitigates stuff. Knowing that he could trust the guy next to him in Tyrann Mathieu, one of the best to ever play the position, like that has an impact. That changes the way that you play the game. It allows you to play a little bit more free, allows you to play a little bit more comfortable. And when you're not thinking, and instead you're able to process, read, react, yeah, you play better. Shocker, right? So look, I put right now, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, and that's okay. That's all right. We'll see how it all goes. I might be wrong. I don't care. Who cares? This is what I always ask you. Where do you call cops? And so it's like, look, I think Johnathan Abram's going to be the front runner to start opposite or next to Tyrann Mathieu, barring some other big news, right? Like if the Saints were to go out there and somehow, some way land Justin Simmons, then yeah, Justin Simmons is your freaking starter. Okay, like we don't have to have a conversation anymore. And then, I get it, right? So barring any big move or even, big draft pick, like if you draft, this isn't the greatest example, but if you draft like a Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota, who really is, again, more like Jordan Howden, more like Tyrann Mathieu, the deep safety situation, then maybe you have a different conversation. And then maybe you're talking about Tyler Nubin maybe starting at, free, and then you're moving Tyrann Mathieu over to strong and let him play down in the box because he can do that too. So you also have the ability to be able to change Tyrann Mathieu's role because the dude can do whatever. And so you can change Tyrann Mathieu's role to put the next starting safety in the best position to succeed in your defense. You don't have to be married to Tyrann Mathieu at one spot. You can move him around. And so that also opens up more opportunity for Jordan Howden as well. If the Saints get through training camp and they're not necessarily liking what they're seeing between the pairing of Tyrann Mathieu at free and Johnathan Abram at strong, then you move Tyrann Mathieu to strong, and then you start Jordan Howden at free. Like there's a lot of great, a lot of that mobility that you'll be able to use. So that's where I think the versatility really helps you out, is that you're not just stuck in a situation where you're like, I got to find one player to go in this one spot. You know what I mean? You have a guy that can fit wherever you want. And then that way you can put the round peg in the round hole, right? Whichever one that ends up being throughout that competition. So it's good. It's good stuff, but I'm very excited to watch that battle. I love safety play. I played safety, so that's like one of my favorite positions in football. It's why I defend safeties with my life sometimes, because broadcast view screws everything up from that situation because you can't see what the safeties are doing and what they've done while the ball's in the air before the camera finally pans over to them. So that's why I've always got a soft spot for safety, but I do love watching this position, and I'm very excited to watch whatever this battle is, again, barring any other big move for the New Orleans Saints. So there you go. Battle at strong safety. Cedric Wilson's contract is good. Khai Harley's a genius, and we're watching LeBron level contract manipulation up in here. We're watching Wilt score 100 every time that Khai Harley negotiates a contract, and I absolutely love it. All right, y'all, I appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen today, make sure you go and check out Locked On Pelicans with Jake Madison, Locked On LSU with Caroline Fenton, with games on the way for both teams. You want to make sure that you're all caught up with the homies. So we appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. I am tripping right now. Oh my God. As always, if you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. Trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.